I am Kitty the Fourth. Welcome to my new YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about three things. One is, who am I? What's my story? Two, what is this channel about? And three, where do we go from here? I am the great-granddaughter of Angus Dunn, who was a member of the ecumenical movement which worked toward abolishing world hunger. He was also a bishop, the Right Reverend Angus Dunn. He was the bishop at the National Cathedral during the 1940s. And he worked to foster desegregation within the clergy, way before that was popular. His wife, Kitty III, I'm named after her. She stood by his side, and we have so many of her writings to share the work that he quietly did behind the scenes, to share how he was a pacifist and quiet supporter of the oppressed and marginalized. Their granddaughter is my mother, Karen Dunn, and she has been a nurse my entire life. In fact, she's still working as a nurse supervisor, working with the ill, the injured, and the sick in hospitals as a nurse supervisor to this day. My dad passed on November 11th, 2000. He worked with the marginalized and oppressed throughout my entire childhood, going from being raised in poverty deep in the hills of the Ozarks in Arkansas to being the president of the California State Employees Association when I was a child. In fact, my brother and I used to spend our summers driving up and down the California coast with my bell bottoms and little curls in my hair. And we would go to affirmative action rallies and protests and things like that. I think I actually have a picture of me right outside that van. When I was 27, my father died. My brother and I had to take him off of life support because his trauma, he had some other untreated, unmedicated health diagnoses as well, but ultimately his death was due to trauma. When I was 27, I was leaving my second marriage due to domestic violence. My first marriage resulted in my ex kidnapping my daughter for 3 days when she was very small, while I was pregnant with our second child. Marriage number 2 was even worse. I came home from burying my father to a restraining order in which my abuser tried to accuse me of doing what he did. And we went to court, and it was summarily thrown out. No restraining order. During that time, I discovered a part of me that is a fighter. A part of me that was old and wise was first awakened. We'll get back to her. After my father passed, I spent many years at home with my kids, doing a lot of volunteer work and suffering through the health consequences that I obtained from my father through genetics. As my kids grew, I decided to go back to school. Didn't know quite what I was going to do with myself, but having been out of the workforce for so long, I went back to school in my 40s to be a social worker at the University of Texas at Austin. And throughout my time at school, I had multiple surgeries, cancer scares, diagnoses, and at this point, I have rheumatoid arthritis, I have osteoporosis, I have four or five autoimmune conditions. I went into menopause at 37 due to premature ovarian failure. I have had 6 abdominal surgeries, including the removal of my uterus and bariatric surgery. I am autistic, I'm ADHD, I'm a postmenopausal Gen X woman, 52 years old, and I own my own business. In 2016, I had an 8 a.m. class on campus the morning after Hillary lost. And walking onto that campus was like a death pall, just like a shroud, was over the campus. In fact, our teachers came in that day and made sure to tell us that our student IDs would get us into the supplies for emergencies in case of like a disaster. And I realized in that moment that this career that I have dedicated, I don't know, at that point, the next decade of my life to, was never going to be the same. So I hunkered down and I focused. How do we fix it? And my entire education has been through this lens of how did we get here? What happened? What are the details? What were the steps? What were the things that caused it? That fall of 2019, I worked extremely hard, very, very hard, to obtain a federal grant to work in an emerging field in social work called integrated behavioral health. And it was a partnership between Dell Medical School and the School of Social Work. I was fortunate to obtain a placement for my final field, our last kind of a internship to get our degree, for spring of 2020 in the infectious disease department, where I was housed in the bullpen with doctors, nurse practitioners, pharmacists, nutritionists, and social workers. Our unit had the first case of COVID in Austin, and we were actually put into quarantine before anybody else. My program was summarily ended, and they shifted me over to doing counseling. So they shifted me over to do counseling so that I could graduate. And they sent me to an agency that was offering counseling to African American men in the height of the George Floyd riots here in Austin, Texas. And so I was home alone by myself with my family, including a teenager, a 9th grader, who had had his entire world decimated. And I was providing virtual counseling as an intern, in which I had never been trained in how to do that, by myself, virtually, and never wanted to be a therapist. And here I was. I got through that placement, and it took several months for me to get my license so that I could go to work. In 2016 and in 2020, I was still a student, and I needed to be protected. This channel is about blending my personal experience, my professional expertise as a trauma therapist, as an EMDR specialist, providing the lens, providing the context of social work to solving our problems in this country. We've just gone through a massive election, and people are really scared, and I have no idea what the next few years are going to look like. But this place is going to be a place in which we figure it out together, in which we're real people trying to figure out what are the real problems. The people that chose 47 did so for a reason. And this channel is going to be about the hard work of reality. So it's not about getting distracted by disappointment, disillusionment, the grief process. We're not going to sit here in denial and blame. We are not going to minimize their experience or our experience. This channel is about finding our way through the disconnection, the isolation, and whatever these problems are, so that we can move forward, so that we can stay together, so this national divorce can stop. I had a professor, Starla Simmons, when I was in grad school, and one of the things that she told me that I carry with me to this day, and that is that people were healing from their trauma before they were therapists. And how they were doing it was in community. A major issue in this country is that we are not connected because of social media, because of news, because of capitalism, because of trauma, sexism, racism, misogyny, ageism, ableism. We lack compassion and empathy because mental health is not taken care of. So this channel is about bringing us back together. It's about addressing the systemic issues fueled by a lack of mental health, by a lack of reality facing, by division, by engaging in our more baser selves. So, we're going to talk about mental health. We're going to talk about what's really going on. We are not going to get sidetracked. We're not going to fall down the hole of denying, looking at the conspiracies, blaming, all those things. We're going to stay present. We're going to stay kind. We're going to stay compassionate. I don't know what the next steps are. I don't know exactly where we're going to go from here. But I will leave you with two phrases that are my North Star. I think this is a real saying in the Marines, but if it's not, don't come at me. But that is, the Marines don't retreat. They advance in a new direction. This channel is about what does that direction look like, rooted in reality, because progressives, Democrats, liberals, social workers, the other side has views. The other side has needs. And the other side, more than 50% of this country, said yes. I want a convicted felon. I want a misogynist. I want somebody that supports Project 2025. And we need to know why. Because according to Newton's third law, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The reaction has been voting in 47. What was the stimulus? What was the reason for that action? What was fueling that drive? That is what we're going to explore here. Albert Camus once said, "In the midst of winter, I found that there was within me an invincible summer." We can hunker down. We can look at the next 4 years as our winter. But in winter is when the roots grow. In winter is when we think. In winter is when we plan. In winter is when we rest and explore and figure out in community with each other. I am looking for people who have a kernel, just a little bit, of summer. It doesn't mean we don't pause. That doesn't mean we don't rest. That doesn't mean we hustle and strive. It means we turn inward and we find it. Another phrase I'm going to leave you with is this: you don't preach from your wounds, you preach from your scars. In 2016 and in 2020, I was a student. I needed protection. I needed to be safe and contained. But what that meant is that for somebody who is accustomed to being the one that runs into the burning building, to be sidelined was never going to sit well with me. But the thing is, now, it's 2024, almost 2025. And the truth is that I have 10 years of training, expertise, experience. I am almost to the top of my license level. Starting in 2016, I was just dirt. Now, I've gone through the crushing crushing, turning dirt into coal and hardening into a diamond. This channel is the culmination of all of those years and that expertise. This channel is the diamond. This is my diamond. This is what I can do because now I'm not sidelined. My final thought for the day. In pagan times, there was the idea of the maiden, the mother, and the crone. In 2016, I was the maiden. I was young, I was naive, I didn't know any better. I was full of ideas and passion and drive. In 2020, I was the mother. I was ready to nurture. I was ready to get in there. I was ready to do the work. Now, I'm a 50 plus, postmenopausal, Gen X, white woman who's pissed off. Now, you get the crone. Now, you get somebody who doesn't have time for your shenanigans, who knows that her time is limited. I don't have young children anymore. Those days are behind me. So now I can dedicate my energy, my time, my knowledge to solving this problem. So, stick around if you dare. Subscribe, follow along, and let's get into some good trouble.